For most of my life, my fandoms were kind of an isolated thing for me, like I just did them by myself. Around 2012, I started talking with other people online, on social media, about, comics and fandoms and movies and so on. Facebook specifically. And in 2014, I found myself in a really uncomfortable situation that I'd never been in before. Like I said before, I grew up with comics and Star Trek and so on. These things have been part of my life so long that if I ever had memories without them, those memories are long gone. Nerd culture is in my DNA, like Gamma is in Bruce Banner's, or like midichlorians are in Anakin. No, bad example. I always considered myself a nice guy when it came to women. I'd been told by plenty of girls in school, high school, middle school, that I was a nice guy, that I was easy to be around compared to a lot of the other guys. I didn't make unwanted advances or creepy remarks or anything like that. I just treated them like friends. So yeah, 2014. There was a big controversy online regarding an upcoming new series starring Spider-Woman in Marvel Comics. Maybe you remember this image. If not, here's what happened. People online were pissed when this was released. It was a variant cover that was going to be for the #1 issue. And it was mocked mercilessly online. It went viral, and a lot of people were pissed off. People said that it was misogynist, sexist. They said it was, turning away potential women readers. People were mad. I was not one of those people. I was mad at the reaction to the cover. As someone who's been a comics fan for so long, I knew that ridiculous proportions and poses and such were just part and parcel for superhero books. They insisted that this was unnecessary, that it's misogynistic and even just bad art from a technical standpoint, and I vehemently disagreed. I told these women who I'd gotten an argument with, there were several of them, and they were coming at me pretty hard. And I told them they don't know a single thing about comics and that they should just shut the fuck up and stay out of my fandom. That they should just let us nerds enjoy what we like, no matter how offended they get. And then they started saying words that really stuck out to me because I'd never been called these words before. I was called misogynistic and I was called sexist. How the fuck could they say this? Like I said, I used to have lots of girls who were friends in school, and they told me I was a nice guy, that I was a good guy. How could I be sexist? Misogynistic? And it hurt all the same. My girlfriend at the time was reading in the bedroom, and I went in there with, shaky hands, and I'm like holding back tears. I was so angry. My self-image had been shattered. I'd never been called these things before. I'd never considered myself this kind of thing. So I needed to be comforted by this woman who also saw me as a nice, good guy who respects women. And she did. She comforted me. She said they were wrong. She said that they don't know me, how sweet I am, how much I respect women. And the pain, the anger, it subsided. It worked. I felt better. But here's the thing. She was wrong. And I was even more wrong. And it took me a couple of years to really realize this. And by then, she and I were no longer speaking, probably because I was such a nice guy. Yeah, I was nicer than a lot of other guys in high school, sure. But that's not a good measuring stick. Being above the lowest bar doesn't mean that you're a good person. It doesn't mean you're a nice guy. So I didn't make unwanted advances or sexual comments towards women that had no interest in me. Wow. I'm some kind of fucking saint, aren't I? That's the absolute bare minimum. And it was fucked up that I ever thought that was, that was as good as I needed to do to be a nice guy and respect women. The fact that it took me until my mid-20s to understand this is a testament to me being a male in a male-dominated world. All this stuff was normal to me. I grew up in the 90s. That's when I got introduced to comics. So of course, all the women were fucking hypersexualized and, just messed up body proportions and looked like this. So it was normal to me. Spider-Woman is depicted on that cover, as well as countless female characters throughout history of comics, but mostly since the 90s, absolutely misogynistic depictions. I'm sure a lot of the artists who drew these were nice guys that respect women. People treat misogyny and, things like racism and ableism and such, and homophobia, transphobia, they treat it like, if you're called that just forever means you are that thing and that you're gonna burn in hell because you're that thing. That's how I felt. That's why I refused to accept those words when they were thrown at me. But that's not what it means. If you're called one of those words, if someone says that, it probably means that you should stop and, reflect. But yeah, Spider-Woman posed like this. Her butt cheeks just spread far apart and her legs up underneath her, though her back is straight and her head is straight up. Spider-Woman or not, that's a ridiculously inhuman way to depict a person. And no, male heroes aren't posed this way in mainstream comics, in a way that, draws attention to their open asses. You gotta go to porn sites to see that kind of shit. That kind of depiction is sexist, it is misogynist, and it signals to potential women readers that this is not for you. Think about that. This is Spider-Woman, a pretty badass woman superhero with cool powers and, like a spy background. She's cool, and yet she's portrayed in a way that will turn away potential customers. When the focal point of a character is their genitals or their ass crack or their tits, it does a disservice to the character and to potential readers. And yet it took me a couple of years to fully comprehend this, because in my limited perspective, which I thought was limitless when it came to comics, because I've been reading them all my life, I know so much about comics. This is just how things were, are, and should always be. And hey, if you challenge that, fuck you, lady. Stay out of my fandom. I was wrong. In a medium dominated by men that has struggled on and off financially for decades, particularly in the 90s, they made the choice to slap this atrocity of art onto the cover of a new series, even if it was just a variant cover. Yes, it's sexist and misogynist, but just from like a financial, economic standpoint, it's a bad business move. You might as well be burning money. And here I was, someone who all my life wanted nothing more than for other people to engage in this fandom that I love, to see the things that I see in it. And in that moment, without hesitation, I was dismissive and mocking and hostile towards people who genuinely had interest, but felt they weren't welcome because of images like this. Because I was entitled. Entitled as a comics fan, entitled as a male. Comics have been my power when things are bleak. They've been my comfort when the world is hostile. And without even second guessing myself, I was perfectly fine denying that for others. I wasn't just unwelcoming of new fans, I was disdainful of them. I mean, if they expect to come into my fandom and to be catered to, that was a choice, even though I didn't even know that I'd made it at the time. And how can we make a choice without realizing that we make a choice? It's a passive choice, because we're choosing not to step outside of our own perspective. We're choosing not to listen to the perspectives and experiences of others, especially those with different perspectives and experiences than us. Denying perspectives that seem to contradict ours, simply because our perspective is ours and it's somehow more valid than others? Fuck that. Fuck that. Eventually I realized there's no reason to be blindly defensive and hostile about my fandoms. In fact, I've learned to listen to other perspectives, especially those that differ from mine. And so have the comics and film and TV industries. They've started to. There's still a ways to go, but they've started listening and they've started incorporating these other perspectives and experiences. And these mediums are better for it. The fandoms are better for it. The content is richer with more fascinating, compelling, diverse ranges of experiences that you can have when you're reading or watching these things. Because it's made up of unique perspectives, and a lot of these are brand new perspectives to these mediums, which means that these mediums that have been around for decades that, have gotten kind of stale in some regards are now, they're livened up. There's new life breathed into them because these new perspectives and experiences are informed by unique experiences. What changed for me is that I realized I have a choice. As a fan and as a human being, I can be a gatekeeper, and I can be hostile and defensive about my fandoms and things that I love and never consider perspectives, or I can be an ambassador for nerd culture, for the things that I love. I can be hostile and dismissive to people who have different connections to these things, or maybe aren't connected yet but want to be, and they're trying to find their place in it. I can be hostile and defensive to them, sure. That's the easiest thing to do. Or I can make the choice to use my experience, my knowledge, my wisdom of these things to educate and to guide others in a welcoming, friendly way. I can offer insights. I can point people in the direction of something that might connect with them maybe even more than it connects with me. I can contribute to building a healthy, positive fandom. And I can share all those ways that I connected as a kid and, all the ways that I've grown to connect with it as an adult. I can share those experiences. They're mine. Those experiences can't be taken from me, but I can share them. I realize that I have an opportunity. And if you're a fan, you do too. And the choice we make on this subject as fans, whatever fandom we're in, it's a monumental one. The more we act as ambassadors, instead of gatekeepers, the more we foster a better, healthier fandom. And as these fandoms become so universal in our society and culture, the more we act as ambassadors to foster positive, healthy fandoms, instead of gatekeepers, the more we improve society too. You have a choice.